Look, Frankie, I know you're upset by these leaks. Upset? It's an outrage! Don't they know no one can look at 60 hertz anymore? Okay, Frankie, can you, first of all, take that stupid thing off your face? You know it's not Vision Pro. It's a dev kit, Drew! I already told you, and I'm trying to get my head and neck calibrated for the additional weight. Okay, anyway, what I'm trying to say is a lot of people just don't care about higher refresh rates on their phones. I don't care what they don't care about, Drew! All that matters is that there's cheap Android phones that have 120 hertz. Even broke people can afford a high refresh rate display. If you're spending that kind of money on an iPhone, you should get that spec. End of story, period, the end. Those aren't exactly the same kinds of displays though, okay? There's a difference in variable refresh rate, and one of them makes the battery objectively worse. Blah, 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 blah. All I'm hearing are excuses, Drew. I think Tim is ready to step down. I am ready to step up as Apple CEO. Let's hear it in the comments. No, all right? You're just gonna raise your hand with that emoji thing in the comments if you want Frankie to be CEO, okay? Oh, God. Now you're engagement baiting. Please, stop. Can this be my channel again, or what? I don't know, Drew. Can it? Well, maybe you just need to turn back into your 2017 self or something. I'm sick of you. Finally, I thought he'd never say that. Let's begin. Well, welcome to a whole new year of iPhone 16 rumors. They have officially begun. Yes, it may seem like it's a long ways away, but if you think about it, it's really only 10 months to go until we're back into iPhone season. So we might as well start talking about it now, and we're kicking off this season with, once again, the most disappointing thing since Disney's Star Wars. 60 hertz, according to very reputable supply chain analyst Ross Young, is gonna be sticking as the default refresh rate for the entry-level iPhones, both the iPhone 16 and 16 Plus. If you want to go over 60 hertz, you're going to have to shell out additional money for the larger 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max. Maybe we get an Ultra, but we didn't get one last year, so I'm just going to pretend it's not happening. But yeah, the Pros are supposed to get 0.2 inches bigger across the board, which means that yes, even the smaller Pro is going to be 6.3 inches now, and then we'll also have the biggest iPhone display of all time at 6.9 inches. Nice. But that's less exciting. That's just like, okay, yay, we're getting bigger phones with probably better battery lives and more tetra prisms. Let's talk about Apple's decision to likely stick with 60 hertz for another year. Sure, it's early, things could change. Apple doesn't have anything locked in yet. Mass production hasn't started yet. But Ross Young has gotten a lot of things right, and personally, just from a marketing standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense for Apple to keep ProMotion as a Pro feature, despite what all of you are saying. I know a lot of you out of principle are like, I don't care if the everyday consumer notices or not. It's just about having feature parity with other Android devices. And yes, you're correct. Very, very cheap Android phones have 120 hertz. Even my fairly affordable, like $400 Doogie phone has 120 hertz. But I think the important point a lot of people are missing is that ProMotion is different from just having 120 hertz. Apple has to do things in their own way, and you may not like it, but honestly, I think there's more motivations for ProMotion than there are previous generation phones. And you might just say, hey, the average consumer doesn't care, but they should have it anyway. Well, the problem is most of those cheaper Android phones everybody's referring to is, hey, there's $500 Android phones or $400 Android phones that have 120 hertz. They're achieving it through different means, okay? They are not using LTPO panels like the iPhone or the Mac or the iPad are, where they're dynamically changing their refresh rate depending on what is on the display. And that makes a big difference in regards to your battery life, okay? So that's the biggest downside to adopting 120 hertz. Partly the reason Apple didn't support it for so long is that the phones that did have it early on usually experienced much worse battery life until supply chains at scale could build more advanced display controllers that could dynamically change the refresh rate to get really, really low when the display was not conveying any type of motion, and that boosts your battery life, and it kind of compensates for all of that time it is showing motion at that buttery smooth 120 hertz, and it ends up being mostly a wash. So you can put a similar sized battery in an iPhone 15 and 15 Plus with 60 hertz, and they're locked at that refresh rate. And with almost the same size batteries, put those into the Pro iPhones that go up to twice the refresh rate and have pretty much identical battery life. Those more advanced display controllers that Apple puts in all of their higher refresh rate devices are objectively more expensive, and they are not the same thing going into those cheap Android phones that basically just cap it at 120 hertz. And that's why a lot of those cheap Android phones you guys are referring to actually ship with 60 hertz hertz out the box. You have to go into settings and manually switch it to 120 hertz, which typically results in a fairly large hit to your battery performance. So be careful what you're saying whenever you say things like, well, cheap Android phones can get that high refresh rates. If you were suggesting that Apple put in those same exact displays that are in those cheap Android phones, which is kind of the argument you're making, cheap Android phone can do it, why can't iPhone do it? Well, that would objectively make the battery life worse out the box, and these entry-level iPhones are clearly not meant for the techie person. They're not supposed to be the kind of person that goes into settings and messes around with a bunch of features. It's meant to be just, the iPhone. Someone unboxes it and uses it, and they go about their day, and they don't think much about the settings. That's a lot of average smartphone users, I'm afraid to break it to you. A lot of them won't even know what you're talking about if you tell them that, oh, you shouldn't get that phone, it has 60 hertz. They'll say, what does that mean? And you'll have to explain to them how refresh rates work and frame rates and all that. And truthfully, a lot of what people are doing on their phones, 120 hertz might never come up outside of animations. I mean, they're watching videos, which are most of the time 30 frames a second, maybe 60 frames a second if they're lucky, and they're scrolling on Facebook, they're checking their email, they're sending text messages, in which case 60 hertz gets the job done, and we don't see too many people complaining about it on other product categories. Entry-level MacBook Airs that people recommend all the time, those are still 60 hertz. The beautiful and super expensive Pro Display XDR that people raved about, that's still 60 hertz. A lot of people went out and bought studio displays for their Mac Minis and Mac Studios. All of those are still rocking 60 hertz because there's not a lot of use cases where having that higher refresh rate is necessary. Yes, it is nice. I'm not trying to say that 120 hertz is not noticeable for especially a person like me. It's extremely noticeable, and I love having it on my Mac and my iPhone. The only big difference is I'm not anticipating that all everyday consumers notice or care about the same things I care about, in the same way that because of my line of work, it makes sense to have a lot of local storage on my MacBook. So just because I like having 4 or 8 terabytes of local storage, that doesn't mean that I think all MacBooks should ship with 8 terabytes by default. That would be ridiculous and naive to just assume that everybody's using laptops or phones the exact same way I am. And I know a lot of people actually recently that have upgraded to the regular iPhone 15, and you know what? It's still 60 hertz, and they're still perfectly happy with it. And you could try to argue with them and try to convince them that they should be more upset with their purchase. You should be more angry that your refresh rate doesn't go up higher, and they're gonna go, what are you talking about? I mean, most TVs people are buying, as long as they're not playing many games on them, which most people aren't, they're just watching cable news or watching their favorite streaming sites, those people are very rarely going above 60 frames a second in the first place. So when you're suggesting that Apple use those cheaper Android high refresh rate display panels, you're saying that the entry-level iPhone should have worse battery life out the box. Or if you're saying that the option should not be toggled on to weaken that battery life, and maybe just leave it at 60 hertz for the everyday consumers, but let me go into settings and activate full 120 hertz if I want to tank my battery life. Well, the truth is, it's an entry-level iPhone. Those kinds of people are not going into settings. It would basically result in additional resources, additional spending that probably the vast majority of the buyers of those particular iPhones would never notice. They would never turn it on, and those features would never be taken advantage of. And I've heard the argument as well that, well, Apple spends all this time and money working on things that hardly anybody notices either, right? They try to put in this attention to detail so that you feel differences even if you don't, consciously notice them, which I agree they do, but that is not an excuse to bring every single Pro feature to the regular iPhones, right? Apple has to make a compelling lineup, and of course, they're financially motivated for you to get a higher-end iPhone. So they're gonna want to put their flagship features and their coolest tech in the higher-end iPhones because those have better margins. Apple is a company, I hate to break it to you, but they're not a charity. They're not doing this as a non-profit. And every year, basically, they have to ask that question. Okay, we want to make some super fancy, high-tech spec iPhones with their 3nm architectures and their 20 times faster USB-C ports. But at the same time, we also want to make some more affordable iPhones. What do we take out? What are the types of things that the everyday average consumer isn't going to care about and isn't going to notice? And honestly, I think ProMotion is the perfect example, as this controversy is proving as something that the tech community really thinks is important, but the sales year after year prove the average everyday consumer, they don't care, they don't notice. And that's why Apple can keep getting away with it year over year, which ticks off the tech community, because we're all saying come on, that should have it, that needs to have this, I care about this, I spend extra money on my phone to have that feature, therefore I need to make other people feel bad that they didn't get that feature. Yeah, this is the perfect narrative. This bickering, this arguing, this downplaying the whole 60 hertz being tolerable, this is perfect for Apple, because you know what the main takeaway is whenever a new lineup of iPhones iPhones come out, the main takeaway from the tech community, for anybody tuning in to a YouTube review or an Apple event recap, is that, yeah, the new Pro iPhones are pretty cool. They're pretty fancy and whatever, but they're expensive. But those entry-level iPhones suck. No one should buy that entry-level iPhone because it has inferior display specs compared to the competition. So the narrative being pushed by a lot of the tech community is that entry-level iPhone is not worth it. Pro iPhone, worth it, but more expensive. And if that's the general narrative, then yeah, a lot of the uninformed consumers looking for advice online are going to feel more inclined to be pushed towards the Pro models, not the entry-level models. Apple loves that you're trying to convince people that they need 120 hertz and that there's a more expensive iPhone that has it. They basically have all of you angry nerds exactly where they want you. And truthfully, I can agree to the concept that, okay, not everybody should be spending even $800 on a new iPhone, because if you're comfortable with an iPhone 15, then you should consider an iPhone 13 or a 12 used or refurbished. That's a great choice, and I fully agree. Going with a cheaper, older model is probably going to be just fine for a lot of people, but it would also be ridiculous to not acknowledge the fact that there are some features the iPhone 15 is rocking that are not present on the iPhone 13, the most noticeable being USB-C, the dynamic island, the frosted glass on the back, a far superior camera with the 48 megapixel sensor. And not all of those things may matter to the everyday consumer, but there are still some benefits like the much brighter display, which does tend to come up in people's day-to-day lives when they're out and about using their phone, taking pictures. So if someone cares about those advantages that the iPhone 15 or 16 has over a couple-year-old iPhone, and they don't care about having 120 individual frames being shown to them every second because they either don't notice or only notice in side-by-side, so they're like, yeah, this is not a $200 feature for me. I still see it as perfectly reasonable, and I think Apple knows that. And also, just supply chain-wise, it may not be feasible for them to switch the entire iPhone lineup over to LTPO, at least right now, because Ross Young is telling us that the manufacturing yield should be good enough by 2025 for Apple to bring those dynamically changing refresh rates to the lower-end iPhones on the iPhone 17 series. So maybe around then, it'll be the first time they bring Pro Motion to the lower-end iPhones, and I'm sure a lot of you are dissatisfied with that. You're like, that's too long, it should have happened on the 15, and it should happen on the 16, but I'm here to tell you, it makes perfect sense for Apple's bottom line. They're trying every year to figure out what is a Pro feature and what is not a Pro feature, what is something that an everyday consumer might care about versus what a techie might care about, and Pro Motion is the perfect example. It's clearly ticked off so much of the tech community that that is not a standard feature because you're a techie and you care about that kind of thing, whereas there will still be dozens of millions of people that all go out and buy a new iPhone that's cheaper than the Pro because they wanted some other feature like the dynamic island or USB-C or the brighter display, and they wanted to save themselves a couple $100. They got the entry model, and you know, they can use that cost savings to double up on the storage, which might matter more to them, or they can use that extra savings on a case or some more MagSafe accessories, that type of thing. And to those who can't tolerate it or say that it still should have it, just, I guess, cope, you know, learn to live with that, because this sounds like the way the world's going to work, and you may be unhappy with that, and that just means you're going to have an unhappier life. Congratulations. But if you disagree with me, feel free to put your wrong opinions down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you all in the next one.